There is a silence that screams louder than any voice you've ever heard. It lives in the space between what you plan and what actually happens, in the chasm where your deepest intentions meet an invisible wall. This is not procrastination. This is your soul's ancient rebellion against a life that no longer fits the shape of who you truly are. You know this feeling, the weight in your chest when you sit down to do something that should matter, but your hands grow heavy as stone. The way your body seems to dissolve when faced with tasks that once excited you, as if some invisible guardian is whispering, "Not this way, not anymore." You've carried this mysterious resistance like a shameful secret, calling it laziness, calling it failure, calling it everything except what it truly is, the voice of an exiled part of yourself, finally refusing to be silent. What if delay is not your weakness, but your soul's most sophisticated form of protest? What if the very thing you've been fighting against is actually fighting for you, protecting something sacred that your rushing mind cannot see? This is not about abandoning responsibility. This is about recognizing that beneath every unexplained hesitation lives an ancient wisdom that knows when the path you're walking leads away from your true home. She sat before the blank document every morning, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat she couldn't match. A successful business plan that would secure her future lay waiting to be completed, but her fingers refused to move. In dreams, she walked through an empty library where all the books had been written by someone else. She would reach for her own story on the shelf, but the pages crumbled to ash in her hands. Her delay wasn't avoiding success. It was mourning the death of dreams she never gave herself permission to dream. Every opportunity arrived like clockwork: promotions, relationships, recognition, all the markers of a life well lived. Yet something in him would find a way to slip away just before the threshold, like a wild animal that cannot be caged, even in gold. His therapist spoke of self-sabotage. His friends spoke of fear of success. But late at night, in the silence between sleep and waking, he knew the truth. His soul was protecting him from a destiny that belonged to someone else's vision of who he should become. The doors he avoided were not opportunities. They were prisons dressed as promises. In ancient mythology, there was a river that began flowing backward, defying gravity and logic. The villagers called it cursed, unnatural, broken. They built channels and dams, trying to force it back to its proper course. But the river had remembered something the villagers had forgotten. Its true source lay not in the mountain above, but in an underground spring that connected to the ocean of dreams. To flow downhill would mean abandoning its connection to the infinite. Sometimes what appears as resistance is actually remembrance. Carl Jung wrote about the autonomous complex, parts of our psyche that operate independently of our conscious will, protecting archetypal needs that our rational mind cannot grasp. What you call delay may be such a complex, a guardian that knows your soul's language better than your ego's demands. When we experience inexplicable resistance, we're often witnessing the collision between two different timing systems, the linear time of productivity and the cyclical time of the soul. The soul moves in seasons, in spirals, in the mysterious rhythms of death and rebirth that cannot be rushed. Dr. Gabor Mate's research on trauma reveals how the body holds wisdom that the mind has forgotten. Your delays may be somatic memories, your nervous system protecting you from repeating patterns that once caused deep injury to your authentic self. The ancient Greeks had two words for time: chronos, clock time, and kairos, soul time. What you experience as delay in chronos may be perfect timing in kairos, the sacred moment when your inner world is finally ready to birth something true. Do you recognize the heaviness that descends when you try to force yourself toward goals that once excited you? The way your energy scatters like frightened birds the moment you sit down to work on what you should be doing. Perhaps you've noticed how your body speaks a different language than your mind, how your shoulders curve inward when discussing certain dreams, how your breath becomes shallow when planning a future that looks perfect on paper but feels empty in your chest. Maybe you felt the strange relief that comes with failure, the secret exhale when plans fall through, as if some part of you has been waiting for permission to stop pretending. There lives within you a carefully constructed version of yourself, polished, acceptable, productive. This symbolic self learned early to perform happiness, to chase goals that earn approval, to silence the wild voice that questions everything. But symbols, when separated from their source, become mere decoration. This tamed self, divorced from your authentic core, begins to wither. What you interpret as laziness or resistance is often this symbolic self's refusal to continue the charade. Your soul stages quiet rebellions, forgetting important meetings, losing motivation for projects that should matter, feeling inexplicably tired when facing tasks that align with who you think you should be rather than who you are. In Jungian psychology, the shadow contains not only our repressed darkness, but also our repressed light, the parts of ourselves too wild, too authentic, too powerful for the world we inhabit. Your delays may be this shadow's way of protecting qualities you learned to hide. Your need for depth in a shallow world, your craving for meaning in meaningless tasks, your soul's requirement for mystery in an age that demands everything be explained and optimized. The rebel in your shadow knows that some things are too sacred to be rushed, too important to be reduced to productivity metrics, too alive to be trapped in timelines that ignore the organic rhythms of growth. The soul does not operate on the linear timeline of achievement. It moves in cycles like the moon, like the seasons, like the ancient spiral dances of indigenous cultures that understood time as circular rather than straight. When you try to force your soul's timing into chronological boxes, something within you rebels. Your nervous system, still attuned to natural rhythms despite centuries of domestication, begins to shut down processes that feel violent to your deeper nature. This is why some of your most creative insights come not during scheduled work sessions, but in moments of surrender, in the shower, on walks, in the liminal space between sleep and waking, when your controlling mind finally releases its grip. Neuroscientist Dr. Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory reveals how our nervous system has ancient mechanisms for detecting safety versus threat. When we consistently override our natural rhythms, our body interprets this as a form of chronic threat, activating protective responses that can manifest as what we call procrastination or resistance. Your body may be dissociating from imposed urgency because it recognizes at a cellular level the violence of forcing growth that hasn't been given time to root properly. Like a plant that closes its petals when touched too roughly, your soul contracts when pushed beyond its organic timing. When you judge your delays as moral failures, your body floods with cortisol, the stress hormone that clouds intuition and disconnects you from your inner guidance. This creates a vicious cycle. The more you shame yourself for not moving forward, the more your nervous system shuts down the very mechanisms that would allow natural motivation to arise. Research in neuroscience shows that guilt and shame literally inhibit the prefrontal cortex's ability to access creative solutions. Your delay may be your brain's protective response to the toxic environment of self-judgment you've created around your own natural rhythms. In indigenous traditions, the visionary archetype, the part of us that sees beyond the immediate and practical, was honored and consulted before major decisions. In our culture, this same archetype is pathologized as dreaming too much or not being realistic. When you force yourself to move at the speed of productivity rather than the speed of vision, you exile this crucial part of your psyche. Your delays may be this visionary self's way of saying, "I need time to see clearly before we proceed." The modern world's obsession with immediate action often masks a terror of the depth and complexity that real vision requires. Your resistance may be protecting you from decisions made in the shallow waters of urgency rather than the deep wells of authentic knowing. Your body speaks a language older than words, older than thoughts. When certain paths make your chest tight, when specific goals drain your energy before you even begin, when your hands grow heavy, reaching for opportunities that look perfect from the outside, this is not psychological weakness. This is somatic wisdom. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's research on trauma reveals that the body stores experiences the mind cannot process. Your physical resistance to certain directions may be your body's way of saying, "This path contains echoes of old wounds. Proceed with consciousness, not compulsion." Sometimes what looks like the body sabotaging your progress is actually the body saving your soul from repeating patterns that once nearly destroyed your authentic self. That mysterious fatigue that appears only when working on projects that should energize you. The headaches that manifest when planning futures that look successful but feel empty. The way your digestion struggles when you're pursuing goals that feed your image but starve your essence. These are not random malfunctions. They are your body's way of expressing spiritual truths your mind isn't ready to acknowledge. Your soma is more honest than your ego, more connected to your authentic needs than your socialized desires. In traditional Chinese medicine, physical symptoms are understood as expressions of spiritual imbalances. Your body's resistance may be trying to tell you that the energy you're investing in certain directions is moving you away from, rather than toward your true nature. There is a part of you that knows your authentic trajectory better than your conscious mind ever could. This part, what Jung might call the self with a capital S, has access to information beyond your immediate awareness. The patterns of your ancestors, the trajectory of your soul's evolution, the deeper currents of meaning that flow beneath surface ambitions. When your behaviors seem to work against your stated goals, you may be witnessing this deeper self asserting its agenda. What looks like self-sabotage may actually be self-preservation, your soul protecting you from investing your life force in directions that would ultimately diminish rather than expand who you're becoming. Consider the possibility that your resistance is actually a form of intelligence, that the goals you can't seem to achieve are goals your deeper wisdom recognizes as borrowed from others' visions of success, rather than arising from your own authentic desires. Your soul has its own agenda, its own timeline, its own definition of fulfillment. When these clash with externally imposed expectations, something has to give. Often, it's your ability to perform in ways that betray your deeper nature. This is not failure. This is your authentic self refusing to be sacrificed on the altar of others' definitions of progress. Many of us carry cellular memories of being rushed through developmental stages we weren't ready to complete. Perhaps you were hurried through childhood, pushed to mature before your emotional self had time to fully form. Maybe you were pressured to choose careers, relationships, or life paths before your deeper knowing had time to emerge. These experiences of premature acceleration create what trauma therapists call developmental trauma, wounds that form not from single incidents, but from the chronic experience of having your natural timing overridden by others' urgency. Your current delays may be your psyche's attempt to reclaim the time that was stolen, to finally give yourself permission to move at the speed of your own unfolding rather than the speed of others' expectations. In our culture's rush to heal, to grow, to transcend, we often repeat the same violence that created our wounds in the first place, the violence of forcing natural processes to accelerate beyond their organic timing. True spiritual development, like the growth of an ancient tree, requires periods of dormancy, seasons of apparent inactivity that are actually times of deep root development. When we try to rush this process, our soul goes underground, protecting its essential nature until conditions become safe for authentic emergence. Your delays may be your soul's way of saying, "I will not be spiritually bypassed. I will not pretend to be healed before I have fully felt. I will not rush toward light while carrying unintegrated shadows." There is something in you so precious, so essential to your true nature, that it would rather remain hidden than be corrupted by premature exposure to a world that cannot yet see its value. This is what the Sufis called the hidden treasure, the divine spark that retreats in the face of anything that cannot hold its sacred nature with appropriate reverence. When you experience inexplicable resistance to sharing your gifts, pursuing opportunities, or moving toward goals that once excited you, you may be witnessing this sacred part of yourself withdrawing from environments that cannot hold its fullness without trying to diminish, categorize, or exploit it. This withdrawal is not cowardice, it is wisdom. It is your soul protecting its essence until you can create conditions worthy of its full expression. In many spiritual traditions, there are concepts of sacred timing, moments when the veil between worlds is thin, when transformation becomes possible, when what was hidden is ready to be revealed. The soul operates according to these deeper rhythms, which rarely align with external deadlines or social expectations. Your delays may be your soul waiting for the right kairos moment, the perfect intersection of inner readiness and outer circumstances that allows for authentic emergence rather than forced performance. When your deepest desires are consistently ignored, dismissed, or postponed in favor of more practical pursuits, something within you begins to shut down. Not just your motivation, but your actual life force, the vital energy that animates your engagement with the world. This is what depth psychologists call soul loss, a protective mechanism where the most essential parts of yourself go into exile rather than continue to be wounded by a life that has no room for their authentic expression. Your current delays may be the first symptoms of this soul loss, your psyche's way of saying, "If you will not honor what I truly desire, I will no longer provide energy for what you think you should desire." Sometimes the goals we sabotage are not our true goals at all, but inherited expectations we've never questioned. The part of you that ruins opportunities may be the part that recognizes these opportunities as golden cages, beautiful prisons that would provide security while suffocating your authentic self. In shamanic traditions, there are rituals of deliberate failure, ceremonies where the initiate must lose everything they thought they wanted in order to discover what they actually need. Your pattern of coming close to success and then pulling away may be your soul's version of this ancient ritual. What looks like self-destruction may actually be self-liberation, your deeper self protecting you from a version of success that would require abandoning your true nature. When you consistently try to force yourself into behaviors, goals, or timelines that don't align with your authentic nature, your nervous system interprets this as a chronic threat. Your body begins producing the same stress hormones it would release if you were being chased by a predator. This biochemical response to living incongruently affects every system in your body. Your digestion slows, your immune function decreases, your cognitive abilities become impaired. What you interpret as laziness or resistance may actually be your body's intelligent attempt to conserve energy in what it perceives as a hostile environment. Your nervous system remembers every time you were forced to comply with expectations that violated your authentic nature. These cellular memories create what trauma specialists call somatic markers, physical responses that activate whenever you encounter similar situations. Your current resistance to certain goals or timelines may be your body's way of saying, "I remember what happened last time we ignored our inner guidance. I will not let that happen again." This is not pathological. This is your nervous system functioning exactly as it was designed to, protecting you from repeating patterns that once caused injury to your core self. What if your periods of apparent stagnation are not empty spaces to be filled with productivity, but sacred pauses that contain their own intelligence? What if these times of withdrawal and resistance are your soul's way of creating the conditions necessary for authentic transformation? In nature, seeds spend months or even years in apparent dormancy before they sprout. This dormancy is not wasted time. It is a period of invisible preparation, of gathering resources and intelligence needed for successful emergence. Your delays may be serving a similar function, allowing parts of yourself that have been scattered or wounded to slowly gather back together. preparing for an emergence that will be sustainable because it arises from depth rather than surface ambition. Before you can move forward authentically, you may need to spend time reconnecting with the voice that has been silenced by years of overriding your natural rhythms. This voice speaks not in the language of logic and productivity, but in symbols, sensations, dreams, and mysterious knowings. To hear this voice, you must be willing to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, not moving, not producing. You must be willing to inhabit the liminal space between who you have been and who you are becoming, allowing your authentic desires to slowly reveal themselves beneath the layers of inherited expectations. This is not passive waiting. This is active listening, conscious incubation, reverent attention to the subtle movements of your soul as it prepares to emerge from its protective hibernation. What if instead of fighting your resistance, you learned to work with it? What if you began to treat your periods of delay not as problems to be solved, but as communications to be deciphered? Begin by asking different questions. Instead of, "Why can't I make myself do this?" Try, "What is this resistance trying to protect?" Instead of, "How can I push through this block?" Ask, "What does this block know that my rushing mind doesn't understand?" Create rituals around your resistance. When you feel the familiar heaviness descend, instead of judging it, light a candle and sit with it as you would with a wise elder who has come to share important information. Listen to what it has to say about the pace you've been keeping, the goals you've been chasing, the life you've been trying to force into being. True alchemy happens not through force, but through the patient cultivation of proper conditions. The medieval alchemists understood that rushing the process would result in fool's gold, something that looks valuable from the outside, but lacks the essential qualities of the genuine transformation. Your soul is engaged in its own alchemical process, slowly transmuting the lead of inherited expectations into the gold of authentic purpose. This process has its own timing, its own requirements, its own mysterious stages that cannot be hurried without corrupting the final result. Learn to recognize the difference between procrastination, avoiding what you know you need to do, and sacred delay, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. One feels heavy and guilt-ridden, the other feels like anticipation, like pregnancy, like something important gestating in the darkness. Your body is constantly communicating information about the alignment between your choices and your authentic nature. Learn to read these messages with the same attention you would give to an oracle or prophetic dream. When you think about a particular goal or direction, notice what happens in your body. Does your chest expand or contract? Do your shoulders rise toward your ears or settle into relaxed alignment? Does your breathing become deeper and more natural, or shallow and constrained? These physical responses are not random. They are your body's immediate assessment of whether a particular path serves your authentic evolution or requires you to abandon essential parts of yourself. Begin to treat these somatic responses as sacred information rather than inconvenient obstacles. Your body's resistance may be the most intelligent guidance you have access to. Sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is refuse to invest your life force in directions that do not honor your true nature. In a culture that equates worth with productivity, the simple act of withdrawing your energy from misaligned goals becomes a profound spiritual practice. This is not the same as giving up. This is conscious discernment about where you will and will not spend the precious currency of your attention and life force. It is an act of integrity, a way of saying, "I will not betray my soul for the promise of external validation." When you feel your energy naturally withdrawing from certain pursuits, consider the possibility that this withdrawal is not a sign of failure, but a sign of wisdom, your deeper self redirecting your resources toward what actually serves your authentic evolution. Tonight, before you sleep, create a small ritual to honor the wisdom of your resistance. Light a candle or sit in natural darkness. Place your hands on your heart and speak directly to the part of you that has been creating delays. Say, I want to understand what you are trying to protect. I want to hear what you know about my timing that my rushing mind cannot see. I am ready to listen to your wisdom about the pace and direction that truly serves my soul's evolution. Sit in silence and notice what arises. Not thoughts, but sensations, images, memories, or subtle knowings. This is your authentic self, beginning to communicate through channels deeper than language. For the next week, when you feel resistance to a particular goal or timeline, instead of pushing through or judging yourself, practice conscious incubation. Set aside 15 minutes to sit with the resistance as if it were a respected teacher. Ask, what are you trying to tell me about this goal? What do you know about my authentic timing that I need to understand? What would need to change for me to move forward in a way that honors both my practical needs and my soul's requirements? Write down whatever arises without editing or judging. You are learning to dialogue with the parts of yourself that have been silenced by the noise of external expectations. What you call delay is often your soul's refusal to participate in its own betrayal. The resistance you feel is not a bug in your system. It is a feature, a sophisticated intelligence that knows the difference between movement that serves your authentic evolution and movement that merely serves others' expectations of who you should become. Your delays are not keeping you from your destiny. They are protecting your destiny from being corrupted by premature exposure to a world that is not yet ready to receive your authentic gifts. The rebellion within you is not your enemy. It is your guardian, your inner oracle, your soul's way of saying, wait, not yet, not like this. There is a deeper timing at work here, a more authentic path emerging. Trust the wisdom of your own seasons. The soul that appears to delay is often the soul that refuses to betray itself for another's timeline. What seems like resistance may be the deepest form of self-preservation, your authentic self, protecting the sacred timing of your own becoming until the world is ready to receive what you truly have to offer. If this resonates with something deep in your chest, that recognition of your own sacred rebellion disguised as delay, let me know in the comments below. Share one thing you've been delaying that might actually be your soul protecting you from moving too fast in the wrong direction. Your honesty might be the mirror someone else needs to recognize their own wisdom. Subscribe if you're ready to explore more of these hidden dynamics between your soul's timing and the world's expectations. Ring the bell for notifications, because this kind of deep psychological and spiritual exploration doesn't show up in everyone's feed, and the algorithm tends to bury content that asks you to slow down rather than speed up. Your soul's timing matters more than the platform's urgency.